Welcome, everyone, to another episode of the Powerhouse Podcast. I am super excited about our guest who is joining us in the ring today to go a few rounds. First, before I dig in any further, let me just say hello to Miss Tina Dietz. Hi, Tina.
Hey, Candy.
Awesome. Well, as you guys know, this is our place to have the big, courageous conversation. This is really about how we get to step into a deeper level of leadership, because leadership is all about how you choose to show up, how you choose to serve others, and how you choose to take responsibility. So we are going to have a great show. As I said, I'm super thrilled. Not only is Tina someone I deeply admire and respect, but she is an absolute powerhouse and one of my dear friends who, man, talk about getting to play in a space with her, just phenomenal. So let me tell you a little bit about this amazing, incredible phenomenon. Tina Dietz is an award-winning and international acclaimed speaker, audiobook publisher, podcast producer, and content marketing expert. In fact, she had a lot to do with me getting this podcast up and running. She is definitely had a lot of influence and input in how this all came together. Tina's podcast, the Start Something Show, was named by Inc. magazine as one of the top 35 podcasts for entrepreneurs. This woman knows her game. She is a powerhouse, as I said. And she is coming to unleash the voice of your message. Internationally acclaimed business coach. She's a world-class audiobook publisher, launch specialist, popular podcast host, and thought leader marketing specialist. She brings passion, vision, perspective, and attention to detail to everyone she works with, and I can attest to that firsthand. Tina's company, Start Something Creative Business Solutions, helps clients who want more than just a business. They want a business oasis. Ooh, I love that. Tina divides her time between Costa Rica and the U.S. Wow. And has been featured on ABC, Forbes, Inc.com, Huffington Post, in national trade magazines, and is all around the radio. Without further ado, let me introduce my friend and the amazing, incredible Tina Dietz.
Thank you. And do go on. Do go on.
Yes, absolutely. Oh, gosh.
Tell me again.
Reading her bio, we could actually spend this whole show me talking about her accolades. This woman is incredible. Not only does she do voiceover, she does audiobooks, she does whatever, but she is just a blast to be around. And I mean, God. Truly, she is a purple squirrel sister of mine. And
damn right.
We have really started a little squirrel movement. But anyway, Tina, I am excited to have you here. Thank you. So tell us a little bit about your journey. How did you get here?
Oh, boy.
And, let's start there and take it, wherever it goes.
Every time somebody asks me that, I want to start like some blues song or something like that. I was born by the river or something like that, But, oh, man. Now I grew up as an entrepreneur. It was really one of those things, kind of like if you ever saw the movie The Godfather 3, which I bet you have because you're a movie buff like I am, and Al Pacino is sitting there and he goes, "They keep bringing me back." That's kind of how my relationship with being an entrepreneur was growing up, because I couldn't stand my parents' business. They worked they had a retail business selling wood burning stoves and fireplaces. It was not sexy at all. And I didn't even know what I was learning at the time, because it was such water to the fish for me to live inside of a business. We lived upstairs. The business was downstairs. And it wasn't until I was out of college and out in the world when I realized that being an entrepreneur and growing up in that way just meant something very different than a lot of the rest of the planet. And that it was almost born of necessity. Trying to work inside, say, the school system with an entrepreneur brain, trying to work inside of the medical system with an entrepreneur brain. Very, very challenging. So that is kind of what led me through a journey of starting a not-for-profit for teenagers focused around leadership, and then into academia, developing programs, connecting industry and high school and college all together, and ultimately back around to private industry, and developing and running my family's training company. We switched from being a wood-burning stove and fireplace company to doing an online massage training company, which still exists today. I know, go figure, right? That's what happens. My parents are just like me. We're all over the place. And then from there, starting a business coaching practice and then ultimately into developing Start Something Creative Business Solutions, my current enterprise, which thankfully is large enough and complex enough and serving enough people that it keeps me from being bored in any way, shape, or form. I finally created something big enough that I can really give my life to, and have developed a really wonderful team around to help people unleash their voices out to the world, which is, of course, my big thing.
I love that, right? And yeah, you do. And I mean, obviously, I know you quite well. And you have an incredible, diverse background. But I love that you kind of rounded that out with the whole discussion around unleashing your voice. And so I know that is your big focus with all of the diverse activities and the ways that you serve people. It is ultimately around helping them unleash their voice. Yeah. But I'm curious, how did you step into a place to really have permission to unleash yours first? Because as we all know, in order to help others do, we get to set the example and open that space first. So talk to us a little bit about what it's looked like for you to unleash your voice. And then we're going to kind of talk about how you help others do that as well.
Well, it's funny, and you know, you and I have spent so much time talking about being vulnerable and being vulnerable leaders. So I'm just going to go right there. Just go right there. And, you know, so much of what we're called to teach, myself included, are those areas where we felt like we had the most to learn and we had the most to break through. And, you know, I tell stories about how somebody handed me a tape recorder when I was 2 years old, and that's absolutely true. I found my love of microphones. I always wanted to be on stage when I was little. I've never met a microphone I didn't like. Unless it was crappy.
For those of you that can't see, that are listening to audio, you should see a gigantic microphone.
Yes, I love my big microphone. It's my beautiful microphone.
I just had to comment on that because that microphone is so awesome.
It's so you associate with me with the microphone. Associate me with the microphone. It's good. But also from a very young age, my voice was very cut off. And I really didn't have much of the ability to say no when I was growing up. And I know a lot of people have had this similar experience. And it took me many, many years, a lot of training. I actually became a therapist because of my own experiences going into therapy and finding it useful and wanting to continue to figure out the human mind and what drives our behavior and what drives leadership, what drives people to excel. And so all of that fed into my own journey of reclaiming my own ability to say no so that I could authentically say yes to what was really important to me. And, you know, it's a lot of time and a lot of dollars in doing that. But I think you and I would both agree that the best investment we can make is always in our own development. Because if we don't treat ourselves like the franchise player that we are, who else is going to do that? So that's been a lot of my motivation in that, and really important to me for people to have a voice and to tell your story and to release your message out to the world, not only to get your message out there, but also because you never know when you might be giving a voice to someone else who still has none.
Right. That's incredibly powerful and really beautiful, that sometimes we are in the position to give a voice to those that aren't able or haven't figured out how. And it's one of the things I love most about you. I love that you're willing to jump into that space that gets very vulnerable and very real right away. I don't like the surface conversations. You
need both. Yeah.
And what I find really interesting is several things. One, absolutely agree with you, the fact that we teach what we need to learn. I constantly say that. I just came off a 3-day event and said the same thing to Mike. I'm like, look, everything I'm sharing with you is the work that I'm constantly doing for myself. And sometimes you get those big ahas as you're teaching it. You're like, oh, how's that working for me? And you get to that in the parking lot, right? To say, all right, I'm going to come back to that. But I'm curious, Tina, because I do know you so well. And I know how powerfully you stand in your voice now. And I know how you're able to help people unlock that for themselves, unleash that. I also know it hasn't always been easy. And I know that you and I both play a different game than some people. We have a different way we show up. We have a different way our voice shoots out sometimes. And
Penetrates?
Yeah, penetrates. That's a great word. I love that. So I'm curious because two sides of that.
Yeah.
Where have you found your biggest challenge in being able to be confident enough to put your voice out there, not someone's diluted version of it? And what has been your big aha in that space?
Oh boy. Well, the journey that I have been on to, I'll say unlearn. What I've had to unlearn is a really old, super old idea that the world is not a safe place. Mm-hmm. And, for those of you who have had anyone out there is kind of learned psychology or the kind of the phases that we go through, one of the first things, our challenges when we come into this world between birth and 2 years old is trust versus distrust. And for me, that was a really rocky road. And so I would think that I was trusting myself. I would think that I felt safe. But then to other people, I might show up as overly, let's say, assertive or intimidating in some way. And that was a real challenge, especially in my 20s, where I didn't understand, I don't understand why I'm showing up for other people as intimidating. There's no intention there. I'm not trying to control anything. What is that? And it really lived in the world of how I was being and some very deep things I couldn't even access. So I just had to keep working at it and keep picking at it because it wasn't, as some people told me, you need to round out those edges. You've heard this one. You got to tone it down. You're taking up all the air in the room. You're getting agitated. I could see it, because this is something we both heard, but it's a combination of two different things. So there is, I'm making this up right now. There's the lemon and the lesson. So the lemon is, and this is the part that sucks. The lemon, I've never said this before. The lemon is the part that sucks, and that is that they are intimidated by something that they couldn't relate to, or that they, didn't feel like they could be with the level of power or leadership that was in front of them. The lesson, though, and the lesson is for us, was really learning how to speak to the room. Mm-hmm. And it's not a matter of toning it down or softening it up or being less anything. It's a matter of being able to trust yourself enough and feel safe enough inside your own body and your own space and your own expertise that you can reach out and connect with somebody else and meet them where they're at and know that there's actually no way that they can hurt you or crush you. And knowing that so deeply in your bones that it actually doesn't matter what they say or how they show up. You are 100% fine. That has been the most profound journey.
Wow. And because you just said it here, we're going to start talking about the lemons and the lessons. So that's going to be a whole new play. Because that's what Tina and I do. We say something.
We just make stuff up.
By the way, go back and watch a couple Facebook Lives. Tina and I
God.
Just in the moment as talking about our purple squirrelness and some other things. But there's always things that just sort of start to evolve. And I have to laugh because I know that you could appreciate this. When I hear you talk about the lemons and the lesson, immediately I think of that Modern Family episode when he does the philosophy and he talks about, how all of us say when life throws you lemons, make lemonade or make tequila and, He always says when life throws you lemonade, make lemons. Life will be like, what? And I just think about that as you say that because I think about the fact that we get, and I want to play on this because I think it's so interesting that so many of us get sucked in, pun intended,
exactly.
Lemon, right? And we let one lemon be the thing that can shut us down when it wasn't even a person that probably was for us in the first place. And I just experienced that recently. I could have taken one person who was really not in a place to be with the rest of the group, who got very, kind of bitter. And then I went, okay, 1 versus 40. So where's the opportunity, right? And so I love that you distinguish between lemon and lesson. I know we're having a little fun with that, but I think that's also part of what makes you so powerful is the fact that you have the uncanny ability to bring and inject humor in a really powerful, purposeful way into those really charged situations where people oftentimes, especially when there's a dynamic of very strong personalities in a room, I think one of the things that I've watched you do is be able to diffuse some of that where a lemon might get much bigger than it needs to be, and bring people back to a space that grounds them in something bigger than that, reminds them of who they are. And I've watched you do that with your clients as well. So talk to me, or talk to the audience a little bit, talk to us about what that looks like in terms of helping others. So you've talked a little bit about your journey, but what does it look like when you are helping others unleash their voice? Especially when for some people, that's the scariest thing in the world. It's that standing in their most magnificent light. And their voice is so critical in that space.
Yeah. Well, one of my favorite sayings is that you can't see the label of the jar that you're in. And I learned that from the artist Hugh MacLeod. In a really great book called Evil Plans on the Way to World Domination, which is a collection of his blog posts. And he was someone that went from being a graphic artist and working for other people, not being happy, and then turning his work into something that was just for him and ultimately for other people as well. But it's so hard for us to see on our own genius. We need that reflection back. And so that is the space that I tend to hold for my clients, and I tend to hold for the people that I work with. And it can be on different levels. You know, my company, we do things as production oriented as, you know, bringing an audiobook to life. But then when we're creating a podcast, or we're doing consulting and business coaching together and development, then we tend to go, you know, pretty deep on things. And it's important to be able to do that. So my background, both as a business owner myself and as a therapist, it's always my job to, again, kind of meet people where they're at, allow them and reflect back to them. You can't even hear what they're saying many times. They can't even hear their own genius. And people will say, I said that? I'm like, yeah, you're the one who said that. You're the one who came up with that. Or I'll draw the parallels. Like, for example, one of my clients has a incredible background working in the aviation industry, and being one of the few women working with executives in that industry. That is her professional background of almost 30 years. And yet when she went out on her own as a business owner, she kind of fell into, I'll call it a trap. I'll just call it a trap. The trap of women's empowerment. Can you hear my air quotes? Okay. And then being frustrated at, what was not necessarily going right for her in this particular space. Like, why is this not working out the way I wanted to? And it was because she had stepped away from her genius and her expertise rather than going further into it. And she felt like she had to do that because she, quote unquote, wasn't ready. You have 30 years of experience and you're not ready. Well, that was a little bit of a disconnect. So we just needed to reconnect those dots. She needed somebody else saying to her, no, you're aiming too low. Haven't you done this before? Yes, I have. Oh, well, then just do it again.
Do you find that tends to be one of the bigger challenges, is either the air quotes of putting the label out there and classifies them in women empowerment, or it creates this frame that may seem too big and unattainable, or it's that not belief of worthiness, even with coming to the table with the level of expertise and experience, and not really being able to connect in a space that says, I see that, I get that. Do you see those as being the bigger challenges, or do you see there being something else that gets in the way as well?
I think particularly the latter, I won't even call it lack of confidence. I'll call it lack of identity. It's really a contextual issue. So, if we're working in, using the same example. So someone who is working at an executive level for 30 years in this particular industry, in aviation, in human resources and specifically. But then they step out on their own. And the dynamic has shifted from being someone who's working inside a company to someone who is coming to a company as an outside resource. And it's so specific. It's just a different scenario. You haven't changed. Your expertise hasn't changed, but the circumstances has changed. And therefore it is uncomfortable and unfamiliar. And you may have not developed the internal identity to see yourself as the person coming to as an expert rather than coming from within as a leader. It's the same thing. It's a different scenario. So what is really only missing there is some practice. And getting comfortable with the situation has nothing to do with you and has everything to do with the context you're used to working with.
Well, one of the things I love that you just said about that, and so I'm going to sort of throw a challenge or an invitation out to you. As I heard you say, it's getting into that space that's uncomfortable, right? It's changing the context. It's putting the space in there and it's doing the practice. So I'm curious, how do you practice and how do you dance in the uncomfortable on a regular basis?
Oh, I usually headlong without a lot.
I knew I was going to get an answer from you.
Oh, that feels uncomfortable. Oh, here, let me shove my head into that space.
Dive into the deep end, right?
Yeah, let me see. How uncomfortable is it going to be?
How do you practice that, though? Seriously.
Well, no, seriously.
But in all honesty.
I'm joking, but I'm not. And because really what I do is, because I've been uncomfortable so many times, it's becoming a little cliche to say this, but it is becoming comfortable with being uncomfortable and learning how to discern and distinguish what's the difference between I'm uncomfortable and this is something I want to get used to, like learning a new exercise, learning a new skill, stepping into a new expertise or new way of being, and what is dangerous, because we often automatically confuse the two. One of my colleagues often says, human beings, we're smart, but we're not too bright. And our brains are a little behind the eight ball sometimes, just on a biological neurological basis, right? We have a hard time distinguishing between a real threat and a non-real threat, the actual tiger versus the paper tiger. And that's where we have to learn how to discern and step back. And that's where the actual practice comes into play, because it can be anything from a meditation practice to working with a coach, working with even a therapist, depending on the situation. There's always some kind of modality or practice that I'm engaged in to help further my own development. And it changes frequently. I actually was saying to someone the other day that I think I want to map out everything I have done from a personal, professional development standpoint from the age of 12 years old, which was the first time that I ever experienced like a therapeutic setting, talking with a school counselor. And like, what are all the things that I have actually tried and experimented with? And I think that's the key, is allowing ourselves to get curious and experiment. And curiosity is my favorite access point for any kind of development or any kind of moving into change.
Oh, that's something I hope everyone just heard and really just kind of let's kind of wash over them, is curiosity is your biggest access point. I think that's really powerful to say that. I think what happens is we allow the paper tiger to become the real, because our subconscious doesn't know the difference between real and imagined. It only knows what we feed it, right? And so that discerning between what's an actual space of putting ourselves in danger versus something that's just truly uncomfortable. And it's getting very clear about the difference between wanting to hurl because it scares you to death and it's not for you and it's danger, or wanting to throw up simply because the butterflies are fluttering so big and it's something that could open up access to more. Because I know, and I know you've seen that around you as well, as people oftentimes aren't so much afraid to fail in that space. It's more the fear of success and what happens when the door becomes wide open. It's almost as if they're afraid to take that responsibility or afraid to believe it's possible, that more is there. And so there's this perceived fear of, yeah, but that's too big, when it's like, that's not big enough, right? And so I think it's really powerful that you say curiosity is that access point.
It is. And it's a bit of a reverse spiral, because if we were to look at, I guess what Brene Brown would call the master emotion, the shame, right? And so another thing that keeps people from playing is fear of being embarrassed, which is really another way of saying fear of being ashamed. Mm-hmm. It's different flavors of the same thing. And if we are going to antidote shame, well, the antidote to shame is courage. But how do you access courage? You access courage through curiosity. And I like to think of it that way because curiosity and courage can both be visualized by imagining a cat, right? The courageous lion and the curious house cat are still cats. They're still felines. So if you can kind of imagine yourself becoming the lion through allowing yourself this playful curiosity of a house cat, you can imagine yourself as a cat, right? You might not be able to imagine yourself as a lion yet and having that pride and leadership and that roar, but maybe you can meow. Maybe you can allow yourself to play with that ball of yarn, see where it goes, pull that thread. Yay, right? There's a playfulness to it that then allows us to go a little bit further and a little bit further and a little bit further. And the next thing you know, you're hunting gazelles on the savannah. You'll be fine. It'll all work out. Well, but you give yourself the access.
Yeah. Well, you've seen the meme, right? Where the cat looks in the mirror and is like, holy shit, I'm Batman.
Exactly.
His ears come up, or the cat sees himself as a lion.
As a lion, exactly.
It is. And I mean, what a great analogy. So one of the questions I have for you, Tina, because I know one of the things we've been doing lately is starting to talk about this whole imagine the possibilities. And I know where you were. I mean, you think about your diverse journey that got you here. And I think about, you always knowing you needed a microphone around you, and you're the stage presence. But when did you imagine the possibilities of getting here? And what's on the next horizon in terms of imagine if for you as you start to dance and play in that curiosity?
All right. So the first part was, when did I imagine?
How did your journey, when did you first imagine the possibilities of creating what you've created? And stepping into that space. And then I want to talk about what's your big imagine if stepping into 2018. I don't even know what year it is. 2018.
It's still early.
Horizon, right?
Yeah, exactly. You know what? I could not have predicted where I am now. I could not have predicted how this was going to look. It looks so much more amazing than I could have made up at the time. If anyone had ever told me, oh yeah, you're going to end up being one of the world's premier authorities on audio marketing, particularly for nonfiction authors and experts. I'm like, it never would have even occurred to me that might be the case. But if I were to look back on my life and look back on my two first loves, the two things I was obsessed with throughout my entire childhood were microphones and books. Those are my two biggest loves. And now that is what I play inside of every day with audiobooks and podcasts and helping people get their message out to the world. I could not have predicted that. And it was really a matter of allowing myself to pursue my own creative journey and my own interests for the sake of them being interests, not business interests, that allowed me to connect the dots between what was so essentially my own, what people call your particular genius, or your secret sauce, or whatever buzzword you want to throw around it, right? I wouldn't have connected that if I hadn't allowed myself to get obsessed about, I'm going to go and learn voice acting just because I want to learn it, because I love it and it was so much fun and I really enjoyed it. And let's go learn how to be an audiobook narrator and learn how audiobooks get processed. That's interesting. And then the dead stop that I had in the moment I realized that all of my clients and colleagues and the influencers that I knew were publishing books like crazy, and no one was doing audiobooks. And my brain was hijacked by the why. Why? So I had to find out, and it was finding out why and then deciding to step in and fill that gap to give people a how to create audiobooks, to create podcasts, that completely transformed my business. It's really that power of obsession, a healthy obsession. So that is the spark that has gotten me this far. In terms of the imagine if, the vision that I had originally for the world and was taking the coaching of a leader friend of mine many, many years ago, when he told me, Tina, you have to create something that is so big that you can't possibly do it yourself, and you may not be able to fulfill it by the end of your lifetime. And that coaching really pissed me off at the time.
As good coaching
often does, yeah. But it was the dream I woke up from several weeks later was this vision of a world where people were coming home from work and engaged in work, their daily, what they spent all day doing for the most part. And they were thrilled. They were thrilled with what they were doing. They were fulfilled in what they were doing. And it wasn't that piece that moved me. It was that they were bringing that home. Mm-hmm. They were raising their kids inside of that world of, isn't life great? You get to do what you love and make a great living from it. It was the truth, not lip service. And so children growing up inside of the deep belief that if they were to share who they were and their gifts and their talents, feeling valued, that they would just run with it. And the idea that human beings could have that sense of freedom and that sense of safety and value is something that continues to just drive the hell out of me. And so my big imagine if is really leaving a legacy, a living legacy now and a legacy long after I'm gone that pays it forward, where people have their voice out into the world, that they can access it, they can speak it, that they are valued, that they are appreciated, and that they continue to help other people find their voices as well, that it's a pay it forward situation. Because that's how I think genius and innovation and love and connection get all unleashed.
Wow. You can all see why I absolutely adore this woman and what she's all about. I mean, talk about leading from love with love, and someone who really gets the idea of creating that living legacy. We've talked about that before, that a living legacy is not, your legacy is not only something that you leave when you're gone. A living legacy is how you're engaged in interacting with people in every moment and what they're experiencing you from that. And I'm sure all of you can feel that right now, that Tina just comes from such a place of deep love and the way she shows up in this world and what she puts out there. And, I want to talk about just a few more things before we wrap up. And Tina, we got to have you back because I just feel like I'm like, oh my God, we're already running out of time. Before I forget, because I think it's really important that you all connect with Tina. I think she has such tremendous tools and resources that no matter how you want to get your voice out there, no matter how you want to create that legacy back in your own homes, Tina is an asset for you in that space. And so Tina, I want you to let people know what's the best way that they can reach out to you, that they can continue this conversation with you, and they can keep up with more of how you're showing up in this world and what you have to offer.
Sure, absolutely. The easiest website address to remember is startsomethingpositive.com. It's the one little stick in your brain because it's just three little words, start something positive.
I love that.
And that'll be the easiest one for you to remember.
Awesome. So please check that out.
Mm-hmm.
So Tina,
Definitely.
I'm curious, as we kind of bring this full circle, I mean, what a beautiful conversation. And I adore you on so many levels and feel like you have been such a blessing. And I really sincerely, this podcast wouldn't be a podcast. It wouldn't be real if it wouldn't have been for you helping me put a vision together and actually putting it into action. So incredible deep gratitude for how you've shown up in my life and who you are for me, what's something you would like to leave as sort of a legacy moment or an aha for those that are listening as we're rounding out this conversation?
I think I'll go back to the idea of bringing more curiosity into your everyday life. So there's all these places that we might feel a little bit like, I wonder if maybe I should try such and such. Maybe I should try such and such. Maybe I should try Facebook Live. Maybe I should try writing an article. I'd love for any of you listening out there to take one of those things that you have been wondering if you should try or wondering what it would be like if, the imagine if, right? Take one of those mini imagine ifs and take the next step towards doing it. You don't have to actually finish it, but what would be the next logical step? So ask yourself, I wonder what I would need to do to be a contributor in Success Magazine. I wonder what I would need to do to become a leader on my team. I wonder what I would need to do to break through my next set of sales goals, or so on and so forth. And give yourself the space to wonder before you start to put it in a box. Unleash your curiosity. Let your brain have a little space to be that kitty cat and play with that ball of yarn a little bit. Let it unravel. Feel a little bit unravel. It's okay, right? Yeah. And if life gives you lemons, you can do what Henry Rollins once said. He said, when life gives you lemons, say, oh yeah, I love lemons. What else you got?
God, I love that. I love that. What a perfect way to close this session out, which is really around unleash your curiosity, right? Taking that imagine if to, I wonder what's the next step. I wonder what I could do right now to open up just a little. It's those baby steps, right? That little access.
Totally.
Because sometimes it's just one little move that can open up a whole new landscape of opportunity and possibilities. And so with that, I sincerely, deeply, from the bottom of my soul, my heart, my toes, you name it, have deep, deep gratitude, Tina, for you showing up and sharing just a little piece of who you are with us, for being the tremendous light you are in my life. I truly don't think I tell you enough how much I deeply appreciate you, and thank you for blessing me with your presence and legacy as we get to play in so many different spaces. So thank you for being here.
Thank you, Candy. You are my purple squirrel soul sister.
We are soul sisters.
Yeah.
By the way, the other day was like a Squirrel Appreciation Day. So
I know. I was so excited.
Right? So for the rest of you, thank you all for being here again to join us for another episode of the Powerhouse Podcast. Unleash your curiosity to truly step into the space to imagine if and open up access to all the possibilities that are available to you. Remember that leadership is a choice. It's a choice in how you choose to show up, how you choose to serve others, and how you choose to take personal responsibility in that space. And it all starts with you saying yes to yourself. With that, this is Candy Barone. I look forward to seeing you all next time. Please make sure you subscribe so you don't miss an episode. But deep love and heart-to-heart hugs to all of you. Mwah. See you next time.